Found my old MySpace page. I now understand why I was single until 25. The username was definitely mine, a Bo'o X Dark Wolf 2003 X Ow. But the face staring back at me from the profile picture wasn't. I mean, it was my face, technically, but someone had photoshopped devil horns onto my head and added glowing red eyes. The top 8 friends were all bands I'd never listened to, death metal groups with names like Cannibal Autopsy and Rotting Flesh Ceremony. My 13-year-old self would have been mortified. I was a Coldplay kid. I wore polo shirts. The About Me section read, "Girls are just holes with attitudes. If you can't handle my darkness, you don't deserve my light." I sat there at my kitchen table, laptop open, coffee going cold in my hand, reading words I absolutely never wrote. My wife Rachel was in the shower. We'd been married for 2 years, together for 5. She knew I'd been a late bloomer. I didn't have my first real girlfriend until I was 25, didn't lose my virginity until 26. But she'd always assumed I was just shy, maybe a little awkward. I'd assumed the same thing about myself. My mom had texted me the link that morning with a laughing emoji. "Found this going through old bookmarks. Your teenage angst phase was wild. Love you." I'd clicked it expecting cringe, maybe some embarrassing poetry or a questionable band phase. What I found was a version of myself I didn't recognize. I kept scrolling. The blog posts got worse. There were entries about hating women, about how females only wanted chads and ignored nice guys like me, about how I was too intelligent for the shallow whores at my high school. Every post was dated between 2003 and 2006, my freshman through junior years. I read them with my mouth hanging open. I remembered being lonely during those years, sure. I remembered feeling left out, struggling to connect with my classmates. But I never ever felt entitled to female attention. I never blamed women for my isolation. My parents had raised me better than that. And more importantly, I knew my own handwriting, my own voice, my own teenage insecurities. These posts read like someone had taken a template from an incel forum and awkwardly tried to match my vocabulary. The comments section was a graveyard of my social life. Under a blog post titled "Why Modern Females Are Broken," there were dozens of responses from girls I'd had crushes on. Emily Brennan, who sat next to me in biology. "This is seriously disturbing. Please don't talk to me anymore." Jessica Cho, who I'd worked with on a history project. "I'm showing this to my parents. You need help." Allison Crawford, who I'd finally worked up the courage to ask to homecoming. "My dad says if you contact me again, he's calling the police." I remembered all of them rejecting me, but I'd never understood why. I'd thought I was just awkward, maybe too quiet, not athletic enough. Now I was reading their words from 18 years ago, their very reasonable fear and disgust at what they believed was my inner darkness spilling onto the internet. But it wasn't me. Someone had written these things. Someone had carefully crafted a profile designed to repel every girl in my high school. Someone had sabotaged my teenage years so thoroughly that I'd spent the next 7 years believing I was fundamentally unlovable. I grabbed my phone and called my younger brother David. He was 33 now, a software engineer in Portland, married with 2 kids. We weren't particularly close. There was a 4-year age gap that had felt insurmountable growing up, but he was the only person I could think of who might remember details from that era. He answered on the 3rd ring, his toddler screaming in the background. "Hey man, what's up? Can I call you back? Lucy's losing her mind over war." I cut him off. "Did you ever see my MySpace page? Back in high school?" Silence. The screaming continued, but I could hear David's breathing change. "What?" he finally said. "Your MySpace. Did you ever look at it?" Another long pause. "Why are you asking about this now?" Something in his tone made my stomach drop. "Just answer the question, David." He sighed, and I heard a door close, the background noise cutting off. "Look, I tried to tell you back then, but you got so defensive. You said I was making stuff up to start a fight, so I dropped it." My hand tightened around the phone. "Tell me what?" He hesitated, then the words came out in a rush. "Your page was fucked up, man. Like, seriously disturbing. All this misogynistic shit, these rants about how women were evil, how you were going to show them someday. I told Mom and Dad, and they sat you down about it, remember? You said you didn't know what we were talking about, that someone must have hacked your account. But then nothing changed on the page, and you kept using it, kept adding stuff. So we all just figured, you know, that you were going through something, some kind of angry phase. Mom wanted to get you therapy, but Dad said you'd grow out of it. I felt like I'd been punched. I don't remember any conversation with Mom and Dad about this. David's voice went quiet. You really don't remember? It was sophomore year, I think. Right after that girl's dad threatened to get a restraining order against you. Mom cried. Dad made you write an apology letter. You said it was all a misunderstanding, that someone was framing you, but the page never changed and you kept logging in. So eventually they stopped believing you. I was shaking now. David, I never wrote any of that shit. I just logged into the account for the first time in almost 20 years. I'm reading it right now, and I swear to God I didn't write it. Someone else had access to my account. Someone was posting as me. Another long silence. Are you fucking serious right now? His voice had gone hard. Because if this is some kind of revisionist bullshit where you're trying to... I cut him off again. Check the IP addresses. Check the metadata. I'll send you the link. I'm telling you, this wasn't me. And I need to know why nobody believed me back then. Why did Mom and Dad just assume I was lying? David's breathing was heavy now. Because you were the only one with the password. Because you kept using the account for other stuff. Adding friends, commenting on other people's pages, uploading photos. If someone else had access, why didn't they change your password and lock you out? Why did you keep using an account that was supposedly hacked? He had a point. A very good point. Which meant whoever had done this had been incredibly careful. They'd had access but hadn't wanted me locked out. They'd wanted me to keep using the account, keep being associated with it, while they destroyed my reputation from the inside. I told David I'd call him back and hung up. Rachel emerged from the bathroom, towel wrapped around her hair, and found me staring at the laptop screen with tears running down my face. Babe, what's wrong? I turned the screen toward her. I need you to read this, all of it, and then I need you to tell me if you think I wrote it. She sat down next to me, still in her bathrobe, and started scrolling. I watched her face change as she read. Confusion first, then disgust, then something like horror. She was a clinical psychologist. She knew the language of abuse, the red flags of dangerous thinking. After 20 minutes, she looked at me with tears in her own eyes. This isn't you. This isn't remotely how you think or talk or write. The syntax is wrong. The vocabulary is wrong. The entire psychological profile is wrong. Whoever wrote this was trying to sound like an angry teenage boy, but they didn't know you well enough to mimic your actual voice. I felt a wave of relief so intense I nearly threw up. Thank you. Thank God. I thought I was losing my mind. She squeezed my hand. Who had access to your account? That was the question, wasn't it? I pulled up the old account settings, but most of the security information had been wiped when MySpace overhauled their system years ago. The email address associated with the account was an old Hotmail I hadn't used since college. I tried logging into that, but it had been deactivated for inactivity. I sat there, running through possibilities. Who would have wanted to sabotage me? Who would have had the patience to maintain a fake persona for 3 solid years, posting regularly, responding to comments, all while making me look like a monster to my peers? It had to be someone close enough to know my schedule, my crushes, my social dynamics. Someone who could post at times when I'd have alibis elsewhere, but not so frequently that I'd notice something was wrong with my account. Someone who knew me well enough to know I was lonely and insecure, and cruel enough to weaponize it. I thought about my high school years. I'd had a few casual friends, but no one close enough to maintain that kind of long-term commitment to destruction. My parents were out of the question. David was only in middle school for most of this, all too young to pull off something this sophisticated. Unless... My cousin Shane, I said out loud. Rachel looked up. What about him? Shane had lived with us from 2002 to 2007. His parents had gone through a brutal divorce, and his mom had a breakdown, so my parents had taken him in. He was a year younger than me, but we'd gone to the same high school, had some of the same friends, moved in a lot of the same social circles. We'd shared a room for 5 years. He'd have had access to my computer, my passwords, my entire life. After he moved back in with his mom following her recovery, we drifted apart. He'd gone to college on the East Coast, and I'd stayed in California. We were Facebook friends, but hadn't actually spoken in probably a decade. Shane had access to everything, I said slowly. He used my computer all the time because his mom couldn't afford to buy him one. He knew all my passwords because we shared accounts for stuff on Netflix, back when you could only have one screen, shared iTunes library, all of that. He knew which girls I liked because he'd hear me on the phone with friends. He was there for every rejection, every awkward social failure. Rachel's eyes widened. You think your cousin spent 3 years systematically destroying your social life? I pulled up Facebook and found Shane's profile. He was living in Boston now, working in marketing, married to a woman named Kelly. His profile picture showed them at a beach, both grinning, both tan and successful looking. He looked happy, adjusted, normal. Nothing like someone who'd orchestrated a years-long psychological sabotage campaign against his own cousin. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. Shane had always been more charismatic than me, more naturally social. Girls had liked him in a way they never liked me. But there had been this underlying competition between us, this tension. My parents had loved having him there, but they'd also had higher expectations for him because they were responsible for him. They'd praised his grades, his sports achievements, his social successes, and I'd been just there. The biological son who was supposed to be thriving, but was somehow always falling short. What if Shane had realized that making me look worse made him look better by comparison? What if destroying my social standing had been his way of securing his position in our family? I opened a browser and started searching for digital forensics experts in our area. If someone had accessed my account from different locations, there might be some kind of trail, IP addresses, login histories, something that could prove this wasn't me. Rachel watched me work, then quietly got dressed and made us both fresh coffee. When she came back, she said, "You need to talk to your parents. Tell them what you're thinking. Before you go down this rabbit hole, they deserve to know." She was right, but the thought of that conversation made me want to throw up. They didn't believe me the first time. Why would they believe me now? I called my mom that afternoon. She answered cheerfully, probably expecting me to laugh about the MySpace link, to share some fond reminiscence about being a dramatic teenager. Instead, I said, "Mom, I need you to tell me about the conversation we had about my MySpace page. Sophomore year, when a girl's dad threatened to get a restraining order." The cheerfulness died instantly. "Oh, sweetie, is this really something we need to rehash? That was so long ago, and you've grown so much since then. We all make mistakes when we're young." My hands were shaking again. "I didn't write those things, Mom. I never wrote any of it. And I need to know why you didn't believe me when I told you that the first time." She sighed, and I could picture her in the kitchen, closing her eyes, trying to figure out how to handle this. "Because you were the only one with access to the account. Because you kept using it. Because your behavior at home started matching what we saw online. You became withdrawn, angry, resentful. You stopped wanting to go to school events, stopped trying to make friends. It seemed like you were retreating into this online identity, and we didn't know how to reach you." I felt tears burning behind my eyes. What if I was withdrawn because everyone at school thought I was a psychopath? What if I was angry because my life was falling apart and no one believed me when I said I was innocent? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Are you saying someone else wrote those things? After all this time?" I took a deep breath. "I'm saying Shane had access to my computer, my passwords, my entire life, and I'm saying that someone very deliberately destroyed my teenage years from the inside out. I just logged into that account for the first time since high school, Mom. I'm reading things that sound nothing like me." Rachel read them too. She's a psychologist. She knows how people write and think, and she immediately said it wasn't me. But none of you believed me back then. You all just decided I was secretly a monster. My mom started crying. "Shane? You think Shane would do something like that? He was going through so much, he was so fragile, we were all he had." And there it was. Shane had been fragile. Shane had needed protection. Shane had been the priority. And I'd been the collateral damage of their good intentions. "I need you to think back to that time," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did Shane ever show any signs of jealousy toward me? Any resentment? Anything that might explain why he'd want to hurt me?" She was sobbing now, and I felt like the worst son in the world. But I also felt the weight of 18 years of shame starting to lift. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know. We were so focused on helping him adjust, on making him feel welcome. Maybe we missed something. Maybe we should have looked closer." I hired a digital forensics consultant named Deepak Chatterjee 3 days later. He had a PhD in cybersecurity from Berkeley and had worked on several high-profile identity theft cases. He charged $300 an hour, but Rachel said it was worth it if it meant getting answers. I gave him access to the MySpace account, the old Hotmail email, and any other digital footprints I could remember from that era. He said he'd need about a week to dig through the metadata. While I waited, I started reaching out to old high school friends. Most of them had moved on, married, kids, careers in other cities. But a few still lived in the area, and they agreed to meet me for coffee. The first was Corey Jackson, who'd been my closest friend freshman year, before gradually drifting away. We met at a Starbucks near his office. He was heavier than I remembered, but his smile was the same. "Man, it's been forever," he said, hugging me. "What's up?" I didn't waste time with small talk. I pulled up the MySpace page on my phone and handed it to him. "Do you remember this?" His face changed as he scrolled. "Oh shit. Yeah, I remember this. This is why we stopped hanging out, actually. My girlfriend at the time, Amanda Arur, she saw your page and told me I needed to distance myself from you. Said you gave off school shooter vibes." He handed the phone back, looking uncomfortable. "I probably should have talked to you about it directly, but I was 16 and stupid. I'm sorry, man." I swallowed hard. Did you ever see me write any of those posts? Did you ever hear me say anything like that in person? Corey thought about it. Really thought about it. "No, actually. Now that you mention it, you were always pretty quiet and respectful around girls. You got nervous, sure, but you never said anything creepy or aggressive. The disconnect between your real personality and what was on that page was pretty weird. I guess I just figured people were different online, you know? Like you were repressing all this anger and letting it out on MySpace." I leaned forward. What if I wasn't the one writing it? What if someone else had access to my account? His eyes widened. "Like your cousin? Shane? He lived with you, right?" I nodded. "You remember him?" Corey snorted. "Of course I remember him. He was always kind of a dick to you. Like, in subtle ways. He'd make little comments about how you dressed, how you talked, who you liked, and he'd do it in front of other people, but always in this joking way where if you got upset, you'd look like you couldn't take a joke. I always thought he resented having to live with your family, honestly. Like he blamed you for his situation somehow. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying memories from those years, looking for evidence I'd missed. I remembered Shane borrowing my computer to work on school projects. I remembered him knowing my passwords because we'd shared so much. I remembered the way he'd seemed almost gleeful when I'd get rejected by girls, consoling me with words that felt hollow even then. "Plenty of fish in the sea, man. You'll find someone, eventually." Like he knew I wouldn't. Like he'd made sure of it. Rachel found me in the study at 2 a.m, scrolling through old photo albums on my external hard drive. "Babe, you need to sleep." I shook my head. There has to be something here. Some proof, some indication that he was doing this. She knelt beside my chair. "The forensics guy will find it if it's there. You need to trust the process." But I couldn't stop. I kept digging through old files, old emails, old chat logs. And then I found it. A folder dated October 2004, labeled Backup. Inside were screenshots of dozens of them. MySpace posts, blog entries, messages. But these were different. These were drafts. Posts that had been written but not yet published. And in the corner of each screenshot, barely visible, was a cursor pointer. The kind that appears when you take a screenshot. Shane had been documenting his work. He'd been keeping proof of what he was doing, either as insurance or as some kind of trophy. And when he'd moved out in 2007, he'd accidentally left these files on my computer in a random backup folder I'd never bothered to explore. I called Deepak immediately, not caring that it was the middle of the night. He answered groggily. "This better be important." I told him about the folder. He was silent for a moment, then said, "Send it to me. Right now. Every file." I spent the next hour uploading everything to a secure server he provided. When I was done, he said, "If what you're telling me is accurate, this is premeditated sabotage on a level I rarely see. Whoever did this wasn't just being cruel. They were being methodical. They wanted to destroy you completely, but they also wanted to be able to prove they'd done it. That's a specific kind of pathology." I felt my chest tighten. "What does that mean?" Deepak's voice was careful. "It means the person who did this wanted you to know, eventually. They wanted the option to reveal themselves, to show you how thoroughly they'd controlled your life. They were playing a very long game, and the end game wasn't just your suffering. It was you discovering the truth and realizing how helpless you'd been." I thought about Shane's Facebook page, his successful life, his happy marriage. What if he never planned to tell me? What if he just wanted to keep it as a secret trophy? Deepak sighed. "Then you telling him that you've discovered the truth is going to be a very interesting conversation." I called Shane 4 days later, after Deepak had confirmed everything. The screenshots matched the posts. The metadata showed they'd been created on my computer, but during times when I'd been at school or at work at my part-time job. The IP addresses for the actual MySpace logins were a mix of my home network and the school library or places Shane would have been. There were even some logins from a coffee shop near my house that Shane used to go to every morning before school. Deepak had put together a 40-page report documenting everything. It was ironclad. Shane answered on the fourth ring, sounding distracted. "Hey, stranger, what's up?" I kept my voice calm. "I need to talk to you about something. It's important. Can we video chat?" There was a pause. Sure, give me a minute." When the video call connected, I could see him in what looked like a home office, shelf of marketing books behind him. He looked older, more tired than his profile pictures suggested. "So what's going on?" he asked, fake smile plastered on his face. I held up a printed screenshot of one of his drafts, the cursor visible in the corner. "I found these on my old external hard drive. I found all of them, and I hired a digital forensics expert who confirmed everything. So I'm only going to ask you once, and I need you to be honest with me. Why did you do it?" The fake smile disappeared. For a long moment, he just stared at me through the screen. Then something shifted in his expression. A kind of cold calculation that I'd never seen before. "Took you long enough to figure it out," he finally said. My stomach lurched. "So you admit it? You spent 3 years destroying my life on purpose?" He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "I did what I had to do. You have no idea what it was like living in your house, being the charity case while you were the golden child. Your parents expected perfection from me because I wasn't really theirs, but everything you did was excused because you were going through a phase. You think I didn't notice that? You think I didn't feel the inequality every single day?" I felt rage building in my chest. "So you decided to make me a social pariah? You decided to ruin my chances with every girl in school, make my own parents think I was dangerous, turn me into a complete outcast?" Shane shrugged. "I leveled the playing field. You still had your family, your home, your security. I just made sure you didn't have the social status to lord over me, and it worked. Your parents stopped comparing us because you became the problem child. I became the success story. It all worked out exactly how I planned." His voice was so casual, so matter-of-fact, like he was describing a marketing strategy rather than a years-long campaign of psychological abuse. "You destroyed my teenage years," I said, my voice shaking. "I spent 7 years thinking I was broken, thinking there was something fundamentally wrong with me. I didn't date anyone until I was 25 because I was terrified of how girls would react to me. Do you have any idea what that did to my self-esteem? My mental health?" Shane's expression didn't change. "Yeah, that's unfortunate. But honestly, you would have been fine if you'd just been more resilient. Most people bounce back from high school bullshit. The fact that you carried it with you for so long isn't really my fault. That's your own psychological fragility." Rachel was standing in the doorway now, having heard the whole conversation. Her face was white with fury. I looked at Shane through the screen, this person I'd lived with, shared a room with, considered family. "I'm going to tell everyone what you did. My parents, your mom, all of our mutual friends, and I'm going to send them the forensics report proving it. Your entire reputation is going to be destroyed. just like you destroyed mine. For the first time, Shane looked genuinely worried. You wouldn't. That was 18 years ago. I'm a different person now. I have a wife, a career. You'd ruin my life over something I did as a stupid teenager? I almost laughed. You just admitted you did it on purpose, that it was calculated and deliberate, and you showed zero remorse. You're not a different person, you're just better at hiding what you are. So yeah, I'm absolutely going to tell everyone. You wanted me to know eventually? Congratulations. Now everyone else gets to know too. Shane's face twisted with anger. If you do that, I'll sue you for defamation. I'll say you fabricated everything, that you're having some kind of mental breakdown. Who do you think people will believe? Me, the successful marketing executive with a stable life, or you, the guy who everyone already thought was unstable back in high school? I felt Rachel's hand on my shoulder. She leaned into the frame. I'm a clinical psychologist, Shane. I've reviewed all the evidence, and I'll testify that the writing patterns are completely inconsistent with my husband's psychological profile. And I'll also testify that your behavior right now is consistent with someone who has antisocial personality features, specifically, lack of remorse, manipulation, and a grandiose sense of self-importance. So, if you want to go to court, let's do it. I'd love to see you explain all of this to a judge. Shane stared at her, and I could see him recalibrating. This is insane. You're both insane. Then he hung up. I sat there for a moment, shaking. Then I opened my email and started writing. The first message went to my parents. I attached the forensics report and a summary of what I'd discovered. I explained everything. The screenshots, the metadata, the IP addresses, Shane's confession. I told them I needed them to believe me this time, that I needed them to understand what had really happened to me during those years. I asked them to tell Shane's mother, to make sure she understood what her son had done to her nephew. The second message went to David. I apologized for not having evidence back when we were kids, and I thanked him for at least trying to believe me once upon a time. The third message was harder. I started composing emails to some of the girls from high school whose comments I'd seen on that MySpace page. Emily Brennan, Jessica Cho, Allison Crawford. I wanted them to know the truth, to understand that I'd never been the person that profile had portrayed. But after writing several drafts, I deleted them all. Rachel was right. They'd moved on with their lives, and dredging up high school trauma might do more harm than good. They didn't need my vindication. I did. And I was getting it, slowly, one revelation at a time. My mom called 30 minutes later, sobbing. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. We should have believed you. We should have investigated more thoroughly. We failed you as parents. My dad got on the line, and I'd never heard his voice sound so broken. I thought we were doing the right thing, taking Shane in. I thought we were helping him heal from his parents' divorce. I never imagined he would hurt you like this. I never imagined anyone could be that calculating at 15 years old. I told them it wasn't their fault, that Shane had been sophisticated enough to fool everyone. But part of me was still angry, still hurt that they'd chosen to believe the worst of me rather than trust their own son. That wound would take time to heal. My mom said she'd already called Shane's mother, and that Kelia, Shane's wife, had been copied on the email somehow and had called my mom directly. Apparently, Kelly had been having doubts about Shane for a while, noticing patterns of manipulation and emotional abuse in their marriage. The revelation about what he'd done to me had been the final piece of evidence she'd needed. She was filing for divorce. Shane's mother was devastated and apologetic, saying she'd had no idea, that Shane had always been troubled, but she'd hoped he'd gotten help. She wanted to make amends somehow, though we both knew there was no real way to undo the damage. Over the next few weeks, word spread. David told some of our extended family. My mom told some of her friends who'd known me back then. Corey, after I gave him permission, told some of our old classmates on a private Facebook group for our high school graduating class. The response was overwhelming. People reached out to apologize for believing the MySpace profile, for treating me like I was dangerous, for not giving me the benefit of the doubt. A few people said they'd always thought something was off about the disconnect between my real personality and my online presence, but hadn't known how to articulate it. Emily Brennan messaged me directly. I'm so sorry. I was scared back then, and I had no way of knowing someone was impersonating you. If I'd known the truth, I would have been your friend. You deserved so much better. Her message made me cry. Jessica Cho said something similar. Allison Crawford admitted she'd always felt guilty about her dad's restraining order threat, that she'd liked me and thought I was sweet, but the MySpace page had terrified her. Learning that none of it was real had brought up a lot of complicated feelings for her, too. The strangest message came from a woman named Lindsay Huang, who I barely remembered from high school. She'd been a year ahead of me, part of the popular crowd, definitely out of my league. She messaged me on Facebook. "I know this is random, but I wanted you to know that Shane tried to do something similar to my younger brother. Not as elaborate as what he did to you, but there were fake profiles, rumors being spread, social manipulation." My brother figured it out pretty quickly and confronted Shane, who backed off. But the fact that he was doing this to multiple people makes me think he had a real pattern of behavior. "I'm sorry we didn't realize he was doing it to you too." I asked her if she'd be willing to document what happened with her brother, and she agreed. She wrote out a detailed account, and I added it to the growing file of evidence against Shane. Not because I planned to take legal action. The statute of limitations had long passed for any kind of civil suit, but because I wanted a complete record. I wanted future people in Shane's life to be able to see exactly what he was capable of, to have the information they needed to protect themselves. Deepak Chatterjee, my forensics consultant, offered to write a formal report that could be shared with Shane's professional network if I wanted. "Guys like this often repeat their patterns in the workplace," he explained. "If he was willing to sabotage his own cousin, he'd definitely be willing to sabotage a colleague or competitor. People in his industry should know what they're dealing with." I thought about it carefully. Part of me wanted to burn Shane's entire life to the ground, to make him feel every ounce of pain he'd caused me. But Rachel talked me through it. "You've already exposed the truth to the people who matter. Your family, your old friends, his wife. Taking it further starts to look like revenge rather than justice. You're better than that." She was right, though it took me a few days to accept it. In the end, I decided not to go after Shane's career. But I did make sure the forensics report was available to anyone who asked, and I didn't hide what he'd done when people brought it up. The truth was out there now, no longer buried under layers of shame and self-doubt. Shane's professional reputation took a hit anyway. Kelly sent the forensics report to several of his colleagues as part of her explanation for why she was leaving him. Apparently, he'd been undermining a female colleague at his company, spreading rumors and manipulating project assignments. After Kelly's information came to light, the colleague filed a formal complaint, and Shane was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. 3 months after the initial discovery, I got a message from Shane's mother asking if I'd be willing to meet with her in person. She wanted to apologize face-to-face, and she wanted to explain some things about Shane's childhood that might provide context. Rachel and I drove to her apartment in Oakland on a cold morning in November. She looked older than I remembered, gray hair pulled back in a bun, lines of worry etched deep around her eyes. We sat in her small living room, coffee mugs warming our hands. "I've spent the last 3 months in therapy," she began, "trying to understand how I raised someone capable of doing what Shane did to you. And I've realized I made a lot of mistakes. When his father and I divorced, Shane was 12. It was ugly infidelity, financial betrayal, custody battles. Shane watched me fall apart, and I think he internalized the idea that the world was a war zone where you had to destroy others before they destroyed you. When he came to live with your parents, I was relieved because I couldn't take care of him, but I should have made sure he was getting proper therapy, proper support. Instead, I just let your parents take over, and I didn't ask enough questions about how he was adjusting." She paused, wiping at her eyes. "That doesn't excuse what he did to you. Nothing excuses it. But I wanted you to understand that he wasn't born cruel. He was made that way by circumstances, and I failed to get him help." I listened to her talk about Shane's childhood, the signs of disturbance she'd ignored, the manipulative behaviors she'd written off as intelligence or resourcefulness. It was painful to hear, but also strangely validating. This wasn't about me being weak or broken. This was about a damaged person systematically targeting someone who'd been kind enough to share their home with him. After she finished, I told her I appreciated the context, but that I needed her to understand the full scope of what Shane had taken from me. I described the years of loneliness, the internalized shame, the relationships I'd sabotaged because I believed I was fundamentally unlikable. I told her about the therapy I'd needed in my 20s to work through the social anxiety and depression that had stemmed from those formative experiences. I told her about the opportunities I'd missed, our social events I'd skipped, friendships I'd avoided, risks I'd been too scared to take. Because I'd been convinced that people would see through me and find something monstrous underneath. She listened, crying quietly. And when I finished, she said, "I will spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. I don't know how, but I will." I told her the best thing she could do was make sure Shane got serious psychological help and to warn any future partners or family members about his capacity for manipulation. She promised she would. Rachel and I drove home in silence. Somewhere along the highway, she reached over and squeezed my hand. "How are you feeling?" I thought about it. "Lighter," I finally said. "Like I've been carrying around this massive weight for 20 years, and someone finally lifted it off my shoulders. I'm angry at the time I lost, and I'm sad that it happened at all. But I'm not ashamed anymore, that's huge." She smiled, and we drove the rest of the way with the windows down, cold air streaming through the car. When we got home, I opened my laptop and did something I'd been avoiding. I went back to that MySpace page and started reading through the comments again, all the horrified responses from girls who'd thought they were dealing with a dangerous person. But this time, instead of feeling shame, I felt angry on behalf of my younger self. That kid had deserved better. He deserved to be believed, to be protected, to have his family fight for him instead of against him. I couldn't give him that now, but I could make sure the truth was known. I wrote a blog post detailing everything: the discovery, the investigation, the forensics report, Shane's confession. I didn't name Shane directly, referring to him only as a family member, but I included enough details that anyone who knew us would understand. I posted it on Medium and shared it on Facebook with a simple caption: "If you knew me in high school, this might explain a lot." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of comments, messages, shares. Old classmates saying they wished they'd known, wished they'd questioned the disconnect between my real personality and my online presence. Teachers saying they'd noticed I'd withdrawn during sophomore and junior year, but hadn't known how to reach me. Friends I'd lost touch with saying they'd always liked me and were sorry for believing the worst. A few people even admitted they'd experienced similar sabotage from other people in their lives and had never reported it because they didn't think anyone would believe them. The post went semi-viral, getting picked up by a few online communities focused on family dynamics and psychological abuse. I did a handful of interviews with podcasters and bloggers who covered stories about manipulation and gaslighting. I became, weirdly, a minor advocate for digital literacy and the importance of questioning online personas. I never wanted that kind of attention, but if my story could help someone else recognize the signs of sabotage earlier, it seemed worth it. Shane, meanwhile, had apparently deleted all his social media accounts. His professional LinkedIn disappeared. According to his mother, he'd moved to a different city and was working remotely for a different company under a slightly different name. He was trying to disappear, to rebuild his life away from the consequences of his actions. I hoped he was also getting therapy, but I wasn't optimistic. 6 months after the discovery, Rachel and I went on a road trip up the coast. We stayed in small bed and breakfasts, hiked along cliff tops, ate too much seafood, and talked about everything except MySpace and Shane and the whole mess. It was exactly what I needed: distance, perspective, the chance to remember who I was outside of this story. On the last night of the trip, we were sitting on a beach at sunset, and Rachel turned to me and said, "You know what I love about you? You've been through something that would have broken a lot of people, that did break you for a while, and you still came out kind. You didn't let what Shane did turn you cruel or cynical. You're still the person who gives people the benefit of the doubt, who assumes the best of others. That's rare." I felt tears prickling behind my eyes. "I don't feel kind. I feel angry and cheated." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You can be both. Anger doesn't erase kindness. And honestly, your anger is justified. The fact that you're not taking it out on innocent people, that you're directing it at the person who actually hurt you, that's the kind part. You're not making the world worse because someone made your world worse. That takes real strength." We watched the sun sink into the ocean, and I thought about all the versions of myself I'd carried over the years. The confused teenager who couldn't understand why everyone hated him. The lonely 20-something who thought he was fundamentally broken. The angry man who'd discovered he'd been betrayed by family. And now, this version, 37 years old, married, vindicated, but still processing. I didn't know which version was the real me, or if they all were, layers of experience stacked on top of each other like sediment. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I could choose who I wanted to be going forward. I wasn't defined by Shane's cruelty, or by my parents' failure to protect me, or by my own years of internalized shame. I was defined by what I did with the truth, now that I had it. When we got back home, I started volunteering with an organization that helped teenagers who were being cyberbullied or digitally harassed. I taught workshops on digital literacy, on recognizing fake profiles and manipulated content, on the importance of questioning the disconnect between someone's online presence and their real-world behavior. It was healing in a way I hadn't expected, turning my experience into something that could help others. My relationship with my parents slowly improved, though there were still difficult conversations about why they'd been so quick to believe the worst of me. My mom admitted that she'd been overwhelmed by having Shane in the house, by trying to manage his trauma and adjustment issues, and that she'd taken the path of least resistance when it came to my problems. It wasn't a good excuse, but it was an honest one. My dad struggled more with the guilt, and we ended up doing a few sessions of family therapy to work through it. David and I actually became closer. He'd always felt guilty about not fighting harder to defend me back then, and now that the truth was out, he seemed determined to make up for it. We started having regular video calls, and he brought his kids to visit us more often. They were good kids, and watching him be a thoughtful, attentive father helped me imagine what it might be like if Rachel and I decided to have children someday. As for Shane, I heard through his mother that he'd eventually entered therapy after his divorce was finalized. His therapist had apparently diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder, which tracked with everything I'd learned about his behavior patterns. He sent me a letter about 8 months after our video call confrontation. It wasn't an apology, exactly, more of an explanation. He wrote about his childhood, his trauma, his desperate need for control during the years he'd lived with my family. He acknowledged that what he'd done was wrong, but he also seemed more focused on explaining his motivations than expressing genuine remorse. I read it once, then filed it away. I didn't respond. Some people weren't capable of the kind of deep accountability I needed from them, and that was their loss, not mine. The real healing came from unexpected places. Allison Crawford, the girl I'd asked to homecoming all those years ago, reached out and asked if I wanted to get coffee. We met on a Saturday afternoon, and she told me she'd thought about me a lot over the years, wondered what had happened to me. "I liked you," she admitted. "Before all the MySpace stuff, I thought you were sweet and smart and funny. I was going to say yes to homecoming, and then my friends showed me that page, and I was so confused because it didn't match the person I'd been talking to in class. I should have asked you about it directly instead of just believing what I saw online." We talked for 3 hours, catching up on our lives, our careers, our relationships. She was a pediatrician now, married to another doctor, with twin girls who were 5 years old. As we said goodbye in the parking lot, she hugged me and said, "I'm glad you found your person. I'm glad you didn't let what Shane did define your whole life. You deserved happiness, and I'm so glad you got it." Those words meant more to me than almost anything else in this entire journey, because she was right. I had found my person. Rachel had believed me immediately, had fought alongside me, had never once questioned whether I was telling the truth. She'd seen the best in me even when I'd been drowning in evidence that suggested I was something else. That was the kind of love worth waiting 25 years for. On the 1-year anniversary of finding the MySpace page, I did something symbolic and probably a little silly. I printed out screenshots of the worst posts, the ones that had done the most damage, and I burned them in our fireplace. Rachel sat with me while I fed them into the flames one by one, watching the words curl and blacken and disappear. "Do you feel closure?" she asked. I thought about it. I don't know if closure is the right word. I feel resolved, like I've taken back the narrative of my own life. Shane wrote one story about me, and everyone believed it for a long time. But I've written a different story now, the true one. And people believe that instead. It doesn't erase the years I lost, but it changes what those years mean. She kissed my temple. You're going to be okay. You already are okay. But you're also going to be better than okay, because you've learned how to fight for yourself in a way most people never have to learn. The last piece of paper curled into ash, and we sat there watching the fire burn down to embers. Outside, it had started raining. One of those sudden California winter storms that comes out of nowhere and soaks everything in minutes. I listened to it hammer against the roof and felt something inside me finally, fully relax. The shame was gone. The secret was exposed. The truth was documented. And I was free. I still think about Shane sometimes, wonder if he's actually changed or if he's just gotten better at hiding what he is. I wonder if his new coworkers know what he's capable of, if his therapist has managed to break through his defenses, if he ever lies awake at night feeling genuine remorse for what he took from me. But mostly, I don't think about him at all anymore. He was a chapter in my story, a painful one, but not the defining one. The defining chapters are the ones I'm writing now, with Rachel, with my work, with my family, with my slowly rebuilt sense of self. I learned something important through all of this. The stories other people tell about you don't have to be the truth, even if everyone believes them. You can rewrite the narrative. You can gather evidence. You can demand to be seen as you actually are, not as someone else has painted you to be. It takes work, and it takes courage, and it takes people who are willing to believe you even when the evidence seems overwhelming. But it's possible. And on the days when I'm helping a teenager in one of my workshops understand that their online reputation is being manipulated, when I see the relief in their eyes as they realize they're not crazy, that something really is wrong, I know that every painful moment of my journey was worth it. Because I can give them something I didn't have: validation, investigation, and the tools to fight back before years of their life are stolen. That kid who was single until 25 because his cousin systematically destroyed his reputation? He's now a man who helps other people protect theirs. And maybe that's the best ending I could have asked for. If you enjoyed this, TM, I'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.